is part of it. Also accelerating retrofitting and removal of wasteful devices. Where we go on property, we've started a lot in the southern areas in Soweto. We're currently doing initiatives in the north in Alex, where we're going onto properties and fixing leaking plumbing fittings and taps and flush masters and toilet fittings that do leak and bypass as a means to reduce wastage. Bylaw enforcement, we are focusing heavily on, currently we've partnered with our JMPD and SAPS, together supported by internal security resources, to carry out these removal of illegal connections and ensuring that bylaw enforcement and the bylaws are respected and enforced. Replacement of pipes and large diameter valves is part of that initiative, as well as customer meter replacement. Look, colleagues, all of these strategies are quite complex, they're quite involved, it's a multi-pronged approach. These are developed through tried and tested methods over the years in industry, and we believe that through these technical interventions we can reduce the demand by 37,123 megalitres per annum. That is quite a large portion that we can reduce demand, provided we are adequately resourced for these projects. Furthermore, we have focused heavily on our top 30 bulk supply meters. These are meters that we draw water via Rand Water. They account for 97% of the total extraction from the Rand Water system, so it's quite a large portion. What we've currently intensified is increasing the restriction on these high demand top 30 meters. Together with that, we also throttle supplies and manage them a bit better. You'll see, doing night closures and throttling of high demand areas as a means to reduce minimum night flows. So inadvertently reducing our system losses and better capacitating our reservoir systems. Together with that, we're targeting, heavily on bylaw enforcement. We're doing a lot of disconnections, a lot of credit control interventions, as well as removal of illegal connections into our system, all which draw our system's capacity down in a negative manner. There's obviously enhanced customer service engagements in terms of comms and stakeholder. That's ongoing. Although there's room for improvement, our colleagues focus a lot into these initiatives to better educate people, to inform them, to keep them up to speed in terms of what we are doing as a utility. Furthermore, this is just a slide in terms of our leaking reservoirs progress. We have identified 22 reservoirs in our fleet of reservoirs that are leaking, over and above the acceptable leakage rate for these structures. And this table indicates the various stages in which these reservoirs are in progress. You'll see I've highlighted the Hursthill Reservoir, specifically because the Hursthill Reservoir sits within the commando system. And as you can see, we are committed to ensuring that the commando system is upgraded to an acceptable level, so we have minimal interruptions. And the Hursthill 2 Reservoir sits in that zone, and it's targeted for the designs and the refurbishment of reservoirs. So all those reservoirs that we see amount to 22. They're in various details in terms of design, detailed design reports, preliminaries, and allocation to consultants and service providers. In a nutshell, we intend to start early next year, which is Q1, with the refurbishment of some of these sites. We must appreciate that these are large structures, and they do not get repaired in a week or two. Some of these projects take up to a year, maybe even longer, depending on the severity and the extent in which repairs need to be done. But safe to say, we have started with that process. In terms of pressure management, remember I mentioned pressure reducing valves. We rely a lot on our pressure reducing valves to reduce system pressures. By reducing system pressures, we reduce our losses through leaks and compromised pipelines. We also are able to better manage our system and reduce the loss due to bursts that might occur. Currently, we're on track. Out of the 685 pressure reducing valves in our system, about 203 of them that have been refurbished and set low. We intend to do roughly about 80% of the total fleet of PRVs by the end of December. There are challenges. These devices have brass and copper fittings. They are susceptible to vandalism and theft. That is why you would see that some of these are inoperational to some extent because of theft and vandalism, which we are trying to curb by better reinforcing our chambers. Advanced pressure management, that talks to the minimum night flow reduction, and I spoke of smart technology, which we are employing in the form of smart controllers. These smart controllers are intelligent devices that are bolted onto the pressure reducing valves They reduce pressures at night when your system pressures and losses are the highest, and we started that process. In the last financial year, we've installed 25. We're currently in process of installing another 45, and there's provision to do a bit more in the coming months in our system. In terms of leak detection, we use smart technology yet again, advanced leak detection equipment to go and detect these leaks and repair them. Some statistics in the 23-24 financial year, about 12,100 kilometers of pipeline were surveyed, and 2,396 burst pipes, 6,727 leaking meters, and roughly 442 leaking valves and 259 leaking hydrants have been found to be leaking or compromised, and they have been reported and repaired in the main. So this intervention of leak detection is quite useful because it has saved us roughly, roughly 9,457 megaliters per annum. Now that equates to layman's terms roughly 25 megaliters per day, 25 million liters a day through these type of interventions. So it's quite a sizable portion that we can save using this technology. Passive leak detection, similarly, like I said, the noise loggers we've now procured. We intend to install the initial 125 noise loggers by the 28th of February. We've received delivery of that. We started process in place to start installing them in critical points. These are smart technology equipment that are able to detect leaks that we will not see with our human eye, so we can schedule the repairs and maintenance of those leaking pipelines and network. Bylaw enforcement, like I said, we're focusing a lot in bylaw enforcement. There's got to be a respect for bylaws, and with the respect of bylaws comes the enforcement. We've partnered with JMPD and SAPS on various initiatives. Some statistics, last week alone, we disconnected 12 hijacked or bad buildings in the CBD. This week alone, we've disconnected 8 hijacked buildings or bad buildings in the CBD. And these are all buildings that have been taken over, invaded, or left in a terrible state where there's leaks and bursts and wastage and there's no accountability. We've stepped in, enforced the bylaws, cut off, and we continue to do that on a week-to-week basis. Also, I mentioned the disconnection of illegal connections. We are going back into those areas, refocusing our resources. We are planning an operation on a prepayment area in the south. I'm not going to mention the name. But we will be coming into the southern area to disconnect. We do not choose whether it's north, south, east, and west. What we look at is we look at our books and we look at where there's default in terms of payments, and we go in. It can be in any area, whether it's a low income or a middle income or high income. It exists throughout all areas, and we target those. In terms of the commander system, colleagues, I think this is the current challenge that we are facing with the commander system. I just want to give an overview. The commando system was, yes, we do understand there's been ever so often interruptions on the commando system. That's something that we are all aware of. And there's plans in place, which I will explain on the preceding slides, which consists of short and medium-term plans. But roughly, this issue that we currently sit with the commando system, namely the Hurstchill, Brixton, and Crosby reservoir zones, it started roughly around the 17th of November. Our sister utility, City Power, had to do some much needed maintenance work at the electrical substation at Iconoff. This is much needed maintenance. If maintenance is not done and we don't allow the engineers space to do maintenance, the reliability of the equipment becomes minimal, and that is when we have more frequent failures. So they were afforded the opportunity to do the much needed maintenance work on the Iconoff, City Power Iconoff substation. And in that process, on the 17th, it impacted Rand Water's Iconoff pumping station, because Rand Water's Iconoff pumping stations draws electricity from City Power's Iconoff substation. Since then, we noticed that our systems on the Joburg Water side, as well as the Rand Water side, were impacted quite negatively. The commando system was the most impacted because it's the most sensitive. There were other systems that were impacted, roughly your Randburg-Roodepoort systems and your Soweto systems, and some of our central region systems. But the commando system, being the most, or one of the most sensitive, was impacted the most and takes a long time to recover. We instituted various interventions in place. Some of them included throttling and closures of high demand areas, night closures of reservoirs, but you would notice that the recovery has been slow. One of the reasons recovery is slow on this system, Demand has been high, and notably so, we must appreciate that the weather conditions have been quite hot. That has contributed to the system taking slow to recover. However, we've reconfigured our systems, both from the Joburg Water side and from the bulk supply side, which is starting to show positive results. I can report back that over the last day and a half, we're seeing an upward trajectory in terms of the signs of recovery on our Herschel system specifically. And we are of the view, if these conditions are maintained, if the system is going in the right direction and maintained, we believe normal operation within the next 2-3 days in the affected areas. The affected areas in the Commander system are mainly Melville, Coronationville, Emerentia, Westbury, and to a portion Claremont. We have provided with water tankers, and currently as we speak, we are improving the footprint of water tankers into these areas. Our short-term plans include night closures, throttling of high demand areas, and our water conservation, water demand strategy plan, which I've alluded to. Our medium to long-term plans is infrastructure upgrades, which I will talk to in the next 2 slides. Now, colleagues, we can see over the next 2 slides, which I will demonstrate, there's a lot of investment and infrastructure upgrades that we've put into the Commando system specifically. We've communicated this quite extensively, and we will communicate this going forward more extensively as well. One of the main flagship projects is at the Crosby pump station, which is the pump station upgrade, which is commenced, the rising main and the rainwater supply line upgrade to feed this particular system. There's also, you can see the scope, it's quite involved. It involves standby generator, it involves electrical upgrades, it involves mechanical upgrades in the pump station, pipeline upgrades, and associated ancillaries in terms of valves, etc. You can see in terms of the financial years, it's spread over the 24, 25, 25, 26, over an 18-month duration. It's quite a hefty investment of 305 million into this project. And some of these items are at procurement stages, some of them have partly commenced. But in the main, the tender has closed on the 4th. It's being evaluated, that's for the main scope of works. And the scope has been consolidated into one major project. We intend to commence around February 2025, which is Q3 for us in our financial years, and move over a period of 18 months to complete the scope of this project. Similarly, we have major investment on the Brixton side. We've obviously have the reservoir tower and pump station, including some reconfiguration work of mechanical and electrical ancillaries at the Crosby pump station. This scope includes the construction of the new Brixton reservoir, which we've communicated quite extensively. 26 megalitres, quite a large reservoir, and a tower, 2.2 megs, quite a large tower, with associated pipework and ancillaries. It's an 18-month project, similarly over 2 financial years, and quite a hefty investment of about 326 million. The contractor has been appointed, project has started, and it's roughly around 66% completion at this point in time. If all goes according to plan, we should be finished, within the end of that 18-month term. The last project in that zone is the renewal or upgrades of the Herschel 2 reservoir. Like I mentioned, the Herschel 2 reservoir is critical in our system. It is leaking. That is one of the reasons why we've put that on bypass. Herschel 1 is leaking, we put that on bypass, but Herschel 2 is leaking, and that is why we intend to repair and reline that reservoir. It's quite a large reservoir, it's 23 megalitres. It involves relining the reservoir and doing some work on the pipework and associated ancillaries. It's a 13-month duration project, estimated at 26 million. The designs are completed, and we are in the process of appointing the contractor from our panel of contractors. It's currently at our procurement stage, and if all goes according to plan, we should start there around March 2025 to repair this particular structure. So, colleagues, that's in terms of our the Commando system and the associated short, medium, and long-term plans that we have already commenced with in that particular system. That is not exhaustive. There's also other repairs and maintenance in that zone that happens on a daily basis. But in the main, these are the major flagship projects to improve and upgrade infrastructure to make sure that we have continuity of supply in this particular zone. I just want to talk a little in terms of our water restrictions. As our residents are aware, and we've communicated quite extensively, and we continue to do so. We currently are under level 1 water restrictions as at 1st September 2024. What that means, it prohibits certain activities between 6 in the morning and 6 in the evening daily. Some of the activities are no watering of gardens with a hosepipe, filling of swimming pools, washing of cars, or paving using hosepipes or high pressure equipment. That is to curb and improve our system capacity during peak. So that's the objective of level 1 restrictions. It is not entirely effective, colleagues, but we are looking at increasing that level of restriction, possibly to level 2 or higher. We must understand that there's certain protocols that needs to be followed because it's highly regulated by Department of Water Affairs in terms of the level of water restrictions. But we are looking into that as we go along. Colleagues, that's all submissions from Joburg Water side. I hope that was informative, and I will take any questions. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you so much, Logan. We will now take questions. If you can just give an indication by raising your hand and identifying your media house. I think it was Alex, Ian, and then Henry. Yes. You can go ahead, Alex.
Thank you so much, Alex Patrick from News 24. I think the biggest, what we're hearing a lot from residents and from councillors, and I know this is ironic because I'm sitting in this press briefing right now, but they're saying that they're not getting enough information from Johannesburg Water, and I think the updates on Twitter, there's kind of a repetition of what they've seen before. I mean, what are the, other than these press briefings, what is Johannesburg Water doing to kind of inform residents, inform the councillors, and just to try and keep up with what's going on? Thank you.
Thanks. Okay.
Thanks, Abdullah Mdila from ENCA. Just on the suggestions of decreasing the water supply by 400 megalitres, I understand, from December to September next year, that's the expected decrease. What are we aiming for in terms of the water reductions then, realistically? What does level 2 entail, and what level, what can we expect in terms of the water reductions if you are to decrease that supply by 400 megalitres as you suggest? And also, where are we losing the bulk of the water? How much is lost to leaks? If currently we're getting 1.7 roughly megalitres per day, how much is lost to leaks? So do we have a leakage problem, essentially? And then also on the commando system, Westbury residents yesterday who are protesting suggest that these issues, as you mentioned, they emanate from the 17th of November, that maintenance that was done by City Power, but they say these have been ongoing for years. They've had these water holes for years where they get supply of water from 1 a.m. and it's most likely cut off by 3 a.m. What are the actual problems in these areas? As they suggest, just a street away in Slovo, they get free water supply which is uninterrupted continuously there, and they don't pay for their water. So what are the actual problems in Westbury and Coronation Road, and how soon will they have adequate running water?
Thanks.
Hi, thanks for organizing this meeting. My name is Julia, I'm from Joburg. So the first question I have is around the ring fencing. So the Joburg City Council approved, as part of the turnaround strategy, for Joburg Water to ring fence revenues. So I just wanted to ask about that. So from my understanding, but please correct me if I'm wrong, I think about 12 billion goes towards the city of Joburg from water and sanitation bills. But Joburg Water said in the past that they only get 1 billion from the city. So with this new ring fencing strategy, is there going to be more money directed towards Joburg Water? Because in the past you said you need 3 billion. And how does that work? Can you just give some more details about the ring fencing in simple terms, because it's been kind of vague, and I think that's really important. And then in terms of fixing the leaks, how many teams are on the ground in each region? And then I wanted to ask, why was there a sit-in strike in Joburg Water Depots from the security teams, I think last week Friday and on Monday? Was it because they're not being paid, or what was the issue? Thanks.
Thank you. Please.
It's Brenton here from Netwerk Feeding Winter. I just want to get an indication of how many leaks were fixed in the past 6 months or so. And then as my colleague also mentioned now, the security risk to your team, is that a real risk? Are you being intimidated on the ground? What's happening with that situation? Thank you.
Thanks. I think we will take responses and then we'll go for another round if there are more questions.
Okay. Thank you for those questions, colleagues. So in terms of the comms updates, I think my colleague from the comms department can refer to that particular question. There was a question, Mdila, from the water reduction in terms of going to the licensing agreement. So yes, remember our short-term plan is in terms of our water restrictions. We have a water restriction schedule which we close or throttle certain reservoirs or certain key distribution high demand areas within the network to reduce that demand. We focus heavily in terms of our physical leak detection so that we can repair leaks and obviously repair them accordingly, similarly with bursts. In the main, it's guided by certain flagship projects. Like I mentioned, we have a water conservation, water demand strategy. Part of that is pressure management, which I alluded to, the smart controllers and the noise loggers, where we're using smart technology, and we've started that process already, so that is one of our mitigations. The other process is aligned to the leaking reservoirs, like I mentioned, but that's more a medium to long-term initiative. And then obviously, the response times, increasing our response times to bursts and leaks, and responding more quickly to isolate these bursts to reduce water. Further to that, you'll notice that we've focused a lot in terms of credit control and bylaw enforcement. We've accelerated that quite a bit. I did allude to the hijacked and bad buildings, the disconnection of illegal connections on our pipelines, amongst others, and obviously the metering and revenue collection from customers. So all of these in the main are the main projects or the main initiatives we as Joburg Water have in place to make sure that we are curbing demand. It is not a singular approach. It consists of various flagship projects, like I've mentioned, and through these projects, we intend to reduce those particular demands. One must also appreciate that infrastructure upgrades in terms of pipe replacement, in terms of reservoir structural repairs, they take time. So it's not a quick fix solution on that. Our so-called immediate plans, which I've mentioned to, i.e. pressure management, using smart technology in terms of noise loggers and smart controllers, improving our response times, turnaround times, isolation of bursts, leak detections, credit control, disconnections, are what we're aiming for to reduce that in the short term, followed by the long-term initiatives. In terms of the water losses, just a high-level figure, in the 23-24 financial year, we have 46.2% non-revenue water. Now, 46.2%, when I say non-revenue water, is not the physical loss of water. It's a combination of physical loss. It's a combination of commercial loss. Commercial loss is typically your billing-related or meter errors, etc. And obviously unmetered, unbilled connections, like your flushing of hydrants and mains, etc. in the network to affect burst repairs or to charge lines. But to answer your question, the physical loss component, where water is physically lost through bursts and leaks in pipelines and to an extent leaking structures, is roughly 24%. In terms of the ongoing issues in the commando system, I did allude to that. The commando system issue is one of our most sensitive in our system. So any small interruptions of supply has a ripple effect in that it takes a long time, days, in some cases a week to recover, through reconfiguration of systems and through the initiatives in terms of throttling and closures of high demands. That is why we now have initiated our medium to long-term plans in terms of improving the capacity of infrastructure in that supply zone. So yes, it's not a new issue. It's an ongoing issue for a while, but we have these plans like I've displayed to to make sure that we have a bit of a more stronger supply, a continuity of supply going forward. But we must also be mindful in that system. There's a lot of, this is old infrastructure, but there's a lot of practices, i.e. where 3-bedroom houses have been demolished and stands have been, consolidated, and student accommodation has taken up. Backyard dwellings have just appeared because people are supplementing their incomes. So the density of population in that particular supply zone, noting our educational institutes are in the close vicinity, comprises a lot of densely populated areas where previously you will have a family of 5 or 6 people. Now, because they've built student accommodation, you have 200. It doesn't just put a strain on the water network, it puts a strain on the sewer network as well. So in the main, we must also appreciate that there's also external issues that contribute to that, in addition to illegal connections and certain cases where we have credit control issues where there's a reluctance or non-payment of services. But in the main, it relates to that. In terms of ring-fencing the revenue, MD will talk to that later on. In terms of fixing leaks, yes, we have 6 operational regions within Johannesburg Water. They vary from north, south, east, and west. They are physical depots that are resourced with human resources as well as plant and machinery. We have dedicated water teams, that means teams that fix bursts and leaks. They are also supported by specialist teams like fitters and welders and electricians that support them in terms of the electromechanical repairs or the valve maintenance and repairs. There's a large complement. There's in excess, if we look at just water teams, we're looking at in excess of about 30 teams in some cases 40 teams minimum that we have, because some of them are multi-skilled teams that don't just fix, they also do meters and connections. They also assist with isolation and they do repairs. So we have quite a large number of repair teams. The challenge we set is you can't have everyone on duty at once. You need to obviously schedule your operations and plan your work, and that is what we started to do to capacitate us a bit more going forward. In terms of the security strike, I think the MD can talk about that as well. And there was, Brayton, you had a question, how many leaks we've repaired in the last 3 months? Look, on an average, I think you caught me off guard, so I can't go into the system now and give you an exact figure. But on an average, in terms of burst repairs and leaks repairs, we're looking at an average of about 2,000 to 2,200 on an average, right, per month. That's a combination of major bursts on pipelines, a combination of minor bursts, as well as leaking valves and connections that we fix. So remember, we have a very large water network, one of the largest. We've got about probably over 12,000 kilometers of water pipeline. And we've got quite a fleet of reservoirs and pump stations as well added to that. So, and we must be considered that the aged infrastructure in the form of AC pipes and steel pipes is also needs to be replaced as well. That contributes to it. Thank you.
Can I take Alex's question? Because you mentioned besides this platform and besides our social media platforms, particularly for councillors. So as Logan mentioned, we have regionalized WhatsApp groups for councillors. And this week on Tuesday, before this briefing with the media, councillors were briefed by Logan and his team on the current problem. So we also have regular councillor forums, and during crisis, we have as and when required councillor engagements where they engage with Johannesburg Water leadership. So there is that process as well with councillors as part of our stakeholder engagement. And councillors also have access to our depot managers and have access to stakeholder relations specialists as well. Thanks. Any other questions? Can go ahead.
Okay, yeah.
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry.
There are a few questions that I just need to add and also cover the question on trading services. Maybe to add also on this question that Nombuso was answering, there is a drive that we are even doing for our MMC where we are having a meeting with councillors We started having a meeting with all the councillors for Soweto, where in that meeting, of course, we're taking them through the whole issue of water conservation, water demand management, because the idea also is for councillors to assist us in mobilizing communities through really the response that we want community to help us with. You'll recall that we always say this type of challenge that we have, as much as there are work that we need to do from the infrastructure point of view, we can't solve it only through the infrastructure. It requires also the aspects of water conservation, which then requires the community. Above that, there are issues around the stakeholder engagement, which will be happening. There is a meeting that's even being arranged with the business chamber and so on. So there will be a series of stakeholder engagement that will be happening, which some of them will be driven by MMC. Just to add also on the issue around, reduction in demand, to say, what does it mean? What are we in for? Of course, our main priority is really to make sure that through technical intervention, through water conservation, we are able really to get to the levels that we are aiming. And the first one being 1,500. We need to be making sure that we are getting to 1,500 from January to June. So that's our immediate goal that we have. And we want to make sure that we get through that mainly through those two initiatives that I've spoken about. So the issue of the level of restriction increasing, it will only come in if, of course, we are not seeing the results that we expect from the in technical as well as the water conservation initiatives as it stands. I must indicate that as part probably of the progress that we must share with you, we assess this thing on weekly basis to say, are we seeing results based on what we are doing? I must say we've seen some indicative that we are going on the right path. Of course, we just need to make sure that we are doing much more. You'll have noticed that in the presentation, we said that our demand in the last financial year has been the region of 1,750 megaliters per day. The last 3 weeks, I don't know if maybe you notice on the graph, the last 3 weeks have been seeing a demand of about 1,600. In fact, there are other weeks where it was even below 1,600, but average, call it 1,600. So it is 1,600 because, of course, these initiatives that are being implemented. But we need to do much more so that we sustain that 1,600 into December. And then ultimately, when we go into January, we need to be working on making sure that we are taking that demand down to 1,500. That's our main goal, so that we can be able to have a proper response through the current initiative. And of course, if the current initiative will get to a point where we're not satisfied with the results, that's when the issue of the increasing the level of restriction will come in. And as Logan indicated, there are protocols for that, where it will have to go through certain governance processes. Maybe before I get to the trading services, let me just add also on the issue of commando. You're quite right. Commando system have been experiencing challenges for a few years now. And that's precisely the reason why the city of Johannesburg is going to invest almost R1 billion in that area only. R1 billion of the projects that Logan presented. The reason being, it's a weaknesses on the current bulk infrastructure. It's not able to function the way it used to. For a simple reason, right now when the demand and supply is a challenge, basically when the demand is stripping supply, you end up with the reservoirs upstream being lower rather than that being, in terms of the level, being at the normal operating level. When the reservoirs are at normal operating level, you are able to push enough water, you're able to pressurize all the line and have the sufficient volume that you require. Right now, after the maintenance that Logan spoken about, on the 17th, the reservoirs upstream, even from the bulk supplier, of course because of the demand and so on, they've been struggling to get to the sufficient level. And when they're not getting to sufficient level, we're not able to get the volume through, because that line really, there's no pump station, it's just rely on gravity based on the level of the reservoir. So hence we have to do those investments to say, even when the levels of reservoirs overall are low, that system should be able to get water like any other system that gets water in the city. And it will be able to get water through because we'll be above the issue of the bulk line that we are going to construct. We are going to construct even a pump station, where Hastile now, the water that gets to Hastile will get through the pump station, will be pumping, rather than relying on gravity feed. So those are some of the changes that will need to happen, but changes through the investment that we need to do to make sure that that system operates better. So on the issue of trading services, this is now the ring fencing of the water revenue. I must start by indicating that you may be aware that municipalities in the main gets their sources of income or have 4 sources of income: water, electricity, solid waste, as well as the rates. Of course, there is a reform that's happening across the country, specifically focusing on 8 metros, whereby the National Treasury have issued a directive which says that the water business needs to be treated differently in the metros in such a way that the resources that are generated from the water business in metros, they need to be invested back in the water infrastructure. Whereas historically, the resources that come from water, of course, they go into the general accounts that are utilized for all various businesses of the municipality. So going forward, the resources that are generated from the sales of water services, they are going to be ring-fenced with the aim of that a good portion of it gets invested back into water. So with that initiative, what we expect, there are 2 things. Of course, it will be able to increase the level of capital investment, the level of budget for maintenance that we need to be able to do in Johannesburg, through the ring fencing. But the second aspect, of course, is the issue that these trading reforms have incentives from National Treasury. The metro that will be implementing these reforms and implementing them correctly, they'll get incentive in the form of allocation for capital budget, which then you can begin to use it to improve your own infrastructure. So it's a program that we are really looking forward as Johannesburg Water and the City of Johannesburg, where, as you said, we submitted our a business plan that was approved by council in it was June, July, and that business plan has been approved, or the turnaround plan has been approved by National Treasury. And now we are into the next stage where we are waiting for feedback around the investment plan which we have submitted, because part of it, because it's got various elements, part of it is that the metros, we need to invest in water infrastructure, invest correctly. For the City of Johannesburg, the example that I can give you, the aim of that turnaround plan is that we need to be able to move within the next 2 years or so from a level of about 1 billion rand in terms of capital investment to a level of about 3 billion rand, because that's what's required in order for us to be able to make sure that the infrastructure is performing correctly. The question around the security strike.
Sorry, just real quick though. So how much money does just water and sanitation give to the city? So how much money specifically now will be ring-fenced for Joburg Water? Do you know that figure?
So we are an 18 billion rand business, roughly 18 billion rand business in terms of revenue. Joburg Water, 18 billion rand business in terms of revenue. We post surpluses of about 1.3 billion or so, 1.3, 1.4 billion per annum surpluses. But as I said, currently the arrangements that have been there historically is not necessarily for full ring fencing. The full ring fencing is only what's going to happen going forward. Which that full ring fencing, of course, it doesn't necessarily mean that, of course, every rand will have to come back to Joburg Water. There will need to be rules, because at the end of the day, there will need to be a system like, for instance, whereby there are clear dividends that are expected by shareholder to say, shareholder may say that Johannesburg Water, we expect you to give us, say, 500 million rand a year. The rest need to be invested back. So that's the advantage that will be bringing to say the resources that come from water, they won't necessarily be going into a general account for everything else that happen in a metro. It will be ring-fenced, but for us that are an entity, of course, there should need to be an agreement around what form of dividend the shareholder will require. For of course, as I indicated earlier, there are 4 streams that make sure that municipality function. And as you know, municipality's duty is much more than the 4 function. So moving into the issue of the strike, indeed, we had an unfortunate situation last week, Thursday, up to the issue was resolved on Monday. This issue was involving the workforce or staff of our service provider that provides security services to all our facilities. They went in an industrial action, and the issue was dealt with. We dealt with the service provider. As you know, the staff don't necessarily belong to Johannesburg Water. As much as the issue was resolved on Monday, it's an issue that we're still looking at, because we need to make sure that we don't have this kind of incident in future. As you may appreciate the type of business that we do, we can afford at all issues of security getting compromised, especially security to our facility. So we're still looking at the matter, and I'm sure within the next few weeks we should be able to conclude it properly.
Thanks. There was another hand. Follow up from Alex. Okay, please go ahead.
Hi, sorry, my name is Gwena Mashali from the Services. I just wanted to ask in regards to the fixing situation.
Fixing leaks.
The fixing of leaks and as well as the reservoir that I understand that is also currently under refurbishment. Is it not a matter that the Joburg Water should have predicted, especially in a situation where Gauteng is considered a multi-factored economy where people are always flooding into? So is it not a matter that the Joburg Water should have prepared for the density, the densely populated areas that might come up with illegal connections, the multitude of people who will be needing water? So is it not a matter that maybe Joburg Water was not prepared for the capacity of many people coming into the city? The other question is also on the infrastructure as well itself. Is it also not a matter that even with these ones that you guys are fixing, are they actual projects that are starting from the ground up that can assist in the future, that we do not have to come again and face a similar situation again? We were saying, no, we're fixing a reservoir once again in 5 more years.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. I just want to double check the numbers for the leaks, because the numbers that we've been, that have been touted is above 35%, and I've just double checked the DWS website, their dashboard for November is above 35% leakage, so that's not non-revenue, that's the leak. So I just want to double check that. And then just perhaps adding to what my colleague has said, I mean, surely there's a town planning issue here where you're getting this densification, which obviously the city has accepted, but they're not adding to the water and other infrastructure. Is there a breakdown in communication between the departments? Thank you very much.
Thanks. Please go ahead.
Morning, Alpha here from Eyewitness News. My question is sort of linked to Alex's question when it comes to departments. I mean, year in, year out, we're told the same thing, yet nothing ever changes. Are you getting enough support from the National Department of Water and Sanitation? Because their criticism is that there's no political will from Joburg Water to address the infrastructure issues in the city of Joburg. Are they giving you enough support? Thank you.
Thanks. Joe.
Yeah.
Deal with the first question, I'll deal with the rest.
Sure. So, colleagues, in terms of the fixing of leaks and the reservoir repairs, look.
Sorry, Logan, just 1 second.
Yes, going back to the fixing of leaks and bursts and reservoir repairs. Remember, any water system operates 24/7. And like a system that operates 24/7, you've got a mix of fairly new, old, and midlife infrastructure. Every portion of our infrastructure has what we call a lifespan. So there's bound to be leaks as the system progresses and ages. So the repairing of leaks, the repairing of bursts, the repairing of reservoirs is not unique to Johannesburg Water. It's prevalent through every municipality in the world. And it needs to happen. I think on our side what has happened is that we've got, as a city, we've got some brilliant plans. We've always had plans from the planning department side, from the town planning, from water, electricity, roads. Similarly, even with our bulk supply, there's been plans. There's engineers that are brilliant that have developed plans. And we do this annually, in some cases biannually, depending on the need. The problem we sit with is resourcing those plans to get them to be constructed and to get them to be realized. And that is where our challenge as a utility, we find ourselves in that space. There's been projects that we've planned for years gone by, and rightfully so. We don't have the financial resources to realize all of that at once. So that is why there is a backlog we sit with at the moment. Our current backlog on water alone is roughly to the tune of about 11 billion. That's just water, not sewage, just water. So you can see that the backlog is because of the resources. Now, when I talk age infrastructure, not all our infrastructure is aged. Age infrastructure we typically refer to on the asbestos cement pipes, which is what we call the AC pipes, and predominantly our steel pipes. Where we're sitting at the moment in Joburg CBD, predominantly around us is old steel pipes. When you go to the southern areas, you go to Randburg, parts of Midrand, etc., and parts of Old Sandton, AC pipes. It's not in the majority of over the 12,000. It's roughly, in the region of under 10%. But when they fail, they take a lot of our resources because it's not a quick fix. You cannot patch. You can patch so much. In some cases, you've got to do a complete cutout and join. So it's not a straightforward process, and that is where we sit with the problem. So to answer your question, we have plans. We've always had plans. It's resourcing of the plans that's the challenge. But we see the light at the end of the tunnel because of the partnerships we have and the support that we are getting from, not just national, but provincial, as well as DWS and our colleagues from Water. We see the partnerships, we see the support, and hopefully if this support is maintained or improved, there is going to be an improvement in the supply network. Thank you, Ali.
So, Alex, the issue around the 35%, I can confirm to you that 35% is not the total number for leaks. 35% is a total number for losses, which in that 35%, it includes both commercial and physical losses. Physical losses out of that 35% is 25%, and about 10% is the commercial losses, which Logan have explained. That has to do with either meter bypassing and so on and so on. So the actual number for physical or for leaks is 25%. And this, I think, is very important to explain as well, because sometimes also the figure of 46%, which is really non-revenue water, is also mixed up with the number for losses. So 35% is the issue of total losses, and what comes up in terms of the additional 10-11% to take to non-revenue water of about 46% is what we call authorized and bill consumption. We know who are the consumers of this water. but that water is not billed for various reasons. Because some of them is the issue of the policy position, historic policy position, where customers were billed on flat rate, which we want to reverse through, or we are reversing through the issue of the installing the prepaid meter and so on. So the second question around the, I think it was from Alex as well, to say, is there an issue between, you know, our processes for development planning, whereby the seems like development went ahead and the infrastructure is only coming now. And I assume this is precisely talking to the commando area. I'll say no, and I'll explain to you why. We always make sure that, and here I'm talking about really development that goes through the process. I'm not talking about development that I decide to build back rooms and so on without necessarily going to municipality, because that we won't know. We'll only know if we are going to do, you know, when we do our inspectors walk around to say, here, there's a building going on that didn't go through. So all the formal development that happened, we always assess to say, do we have capacity or not? Sitting here, I know there's a serious unhappiness in the area of Midrand, because we are not approving development in the area of Midrand. Simply, we've got constraint around water supply. We're not approving development in the area, just the western part of the city, where commando supply, because we know we've got constraint around the water supply. So we always assess every time before we approve development to make sure that are we going to be able to cover that development. But the issue for commando, what I can explain, what has happened there is that particular system, the above, of course, these other issues that we may have for the infrastructure itself, the particular system historically has been operated well based on the head or level of the reservoirs upstream, the levels of the bulk supply. But as we know, the issue of the demand and supply, not necessarily, or the demand exceeding supply, when the reservoir upstream, whenever they operate at lower level, we end up not being able to pressurize the line. So it's more of a technical issue where the system was operating okay in the past, but right now, with the challenges of demand exceeding supply, the system is not able to operate correctly. So hence we need to bring the pump stations and so on. On the issue, the last question was saying, are we getting support from national, DWS and so on? Do we have political support? We do have full political support. An example that I can give you, I mean, the colleague asked earlier around the turnaround plan for trading services. This is a turnaround plan that has been approved by council. I think that's, and that if you go through that plan, it really articulates how the city of Johannesburg is going to improve the water infrastructure. And that, I think it's a very good support, because it's really going to take us forward in terms of making sure that all the necessary and required investment in this water infrastructure, they start flowing in. And just to add in my response around the support, I'm sure you may have heard that there are also ongoing meetings that happen between ourselves, national and province. And these are meetings that are happening almost on a weekly basis, where we engage around these challenges that we are having in Gauteng, and all of us agreeing in terms of what do we need to do from various metros and municipalities. So there is clear support around this in all spheres of government, and we are all working together. Thanks. I think there was one question that we didn't answer around the number of teams.
I think
Look,
Logan did.
okay,
Yeah,
sure.
Logan did. I don't know if Alex, you would want my colleague Bongosi to just touch on the councillor engagement as well, or if you're satisfied with the answer he gave, because he's directly responsible for convening and communicating with councillors and communities.
I'm satisfied with your answer. I think that there's like a kind of blame game that, kind of goes on where there's just so much pressure from the residents, and residents are just, I think they just want that answer, like when is the water coming back on, and you just can't answer that question. And understandably, I mean, you don't know. So, but I think you have answered that question.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much.
And maybe if I can just add on that point, Alex, I think one of the things that we try really to communicate it, and maybe we need to do much more, because I think with the experience that we went through with electricity challenges, sometimes residents think that with water, you can have a very clear, precise communication like what we have with electricity. We're going to switch you off now at 10, we'll switch you back at 12. Unfortunately, with water, it doesn't work that way. There are many variables for a system to be able to come back. Hence, at some point, you'll find that residents may think we are keeping on communicating same thing. It's because the information hasn't changed or the system hasn't changed. We are either working on bringing additional measure so that we can be able to see that change that we require. And once we bring those additional measures, we need to wait first. We can't say reconfigure the system now and expect that it will give. If we reconfigure now, we expect results tomorrow. You know, if we reconfigure now, we expect results after 12 hours. Then we'll start seeing, are we going the right direction or not? Do we need to do extra thing for it to give us better results and so on? So those are some of the things that really we need from our end to find a way of really communicating to our residents and communicate better so that everyone understands how the water system functions.
Any additional questions? Okay, I take it everyone is fine. We will share the presentation that was done by Logan. Nolwazi will share it. And then we'll, of course, continue to communicate any new developments regarding Westbury and the affected areas. Thank you very much for joining us. And we may convene another media briefing in the coming weeks just to update you on how our system is recovering. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Amy. Just need to discuss with you one thing. Yeah, sure.